I'm Diana, 31 female. I live in a city that never sleeps, in an apartment I designed to be my quiet sanctuary from the noise. As an architectural designer, I've spent my career creating beautiful, functional spaces for others, but this little corner of the world was all mine. It was also supposed to be the place where my fiancé, Liam, and I would start our life together. The loss of my mother a year ago was the hardest thing I've ever endured, and her inheritance felt like her final hug, a safety net she'd left to make sure I would always be okay. I never imagined that the man I promised to marry would see my mother's final gift not as a shield to protect me, but as a vault for him to plunder. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The first 6 months after my mother passed were a blur of grief. I moved through life like a ghost, the world muted and gray. Liam was my rock during that time, or so I thought. He held me when I cried, listened patiently as I recounted the same cherished memories of my mom over and over, and gently reminded me to eat when I'd forget. He was the steady hand on my back, guiding me through the fog. "We're a team, Diana," he would whisper, his voice a soothing balm. "Whatever you're feeling, we'll face it together." I clung to those words, believing they were the foundation of the life we were building. When the estate was finally settled, the number that appeared in my bank account was staggering. My mom had been a savvy investor and a diligent saver her whole life. She wasn't flashy, but she was brilliant with money, and this inheritance was the culmination of a lifetime of her hard work. It was enough to pay off my student loans, put a massive down payment on a house, and still have a significant cushion for the future. Seeing it there, officially mine, brought a fresh wave of grief. It wasn't just money, it was my mother's legacy. It was proof of her love, her final act of taking care of me. I told Liam that night, my voice thick with emotion. He held me, his eyes wide with what I mistook for awe and shared solemnity. "Your mom was an incredible woman," he said, kissing my forehead. "This is life-changing, babe. Our life is going to be amazing." His use of "our" felt right. We were getting married in less than a year. Of course, my future was his future. I envisioned us using the money to build our dream home, a place I would design from the ground up, with a garden just like my mom used to keep. It would be a house filled with love and laughter, a testament to the family she had started and the one I was about to begin with Liam. His own family was a big part of my life. I adored his parents, and I was especially close with his older brother, Ethan, and his wife, Olivia. They were the salt of the earth, kind, gentle, and utterly devoted to each other. Ethan was a high school history teacher who was passionate about his students, and Olivia was a part-time librarian who seemed to carry a serene warmth with her wherever she went. Their life was modest but full of love. Their only sadness, a topic spoken of in hushed and gentle tones, was their struggle to have a child. They had been trying for years, enduring the grueling emotional and physical toll of infertility with quiet grace. My heart ached for them. I knew how much they wanted to be parents, and it seemed so unfair that two people with so much love to give were facing such a painful challenge. Shortly after the inheritance came through, Liam brought them up more frequently. We'd be cooking dinner and he'd say, "Spoke to Ethan today. Another negative test. Olivia is just devastated." My heart would clench in sympathy. "Is there anything we can do?" I'd ask, and Liam would just shake his head with a sigh, looking thoughtful. "It's just the money, you know? IVF is their last option, but it's astronomically expensive. Ethan would never ask anyone for help, he's too proud." I felt a pang of guilt. Here I was, sitting on a fortune, while people I cared about were suffering because of money. I even brought it up to Liam one night. "Maybe we could help them," I suggested tentatively. "We could give them a loan, something to get them started with a round of treatment." Liam immediately shut it down, but in a way that seemed noble. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "That's their burden to carry, Diana. I would never let my brother feel like a charity case, and I would never, ever ask you to use your mom's money for that. That money is for you, for us." I was touched by his fierce protection of my inheritance and his pride on his brother's behalf. It made me love him even more. He seemed so honorable, so principled. He understood the sanctity of what my mother had left me. He was setting boundaries to protect me, to protect his family's dignity. It was the mark of a good man, a man I was proud to be marrying. The wedding planning kicked into high gear. We booked a beautiful venue, I found my dream dress, and we started working on the guest list. Liam was enthusiastic about every detail, though he had a taste for the extravagant. He pushed for the more expensive catering package, the top-shelf open bar, and the most popular band in the city. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime celebration," he argued with a charming grin. "We should make it unforgettable." I was more practical, but his joy was infectious, and with the financial security of the inheritance, I felt we could afford to splurge a little. I let him take the lead on negotiating with vendors, trusting his judgment. After all, he was a financial advisor. He understood contracts and value better than I did. We were happy. We were planning a beautiful wedding and an even more beautiful life. Looking back, the ground beneath my perfect future was already riddled with cracks, but I was too blissfully in love to notice. I was so focused on the promise of our life together that I never saw the calculating greed reflected in his eyes. He wasn't my partner in grief or my co-creator in a shared future. He was a predator, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike. And my mother's legacy wasn't a sacred gift to him. It was just a jackpot he was about to convince me to hand over. The shift happened about 2 months after the inheritance cleared. The initial sensitivity Liam had shown around the topic of my mother's money began to erode, replaced by a subtle, creeping sense of entitlement. It started with small comments. "Once we're married and combine our finances, we should really look at moving your inheritance into a higher-yield investment portfolio," he'd say, sounding every bit the professional financial advisor. At first, I appreciated the advice, but I gently pushed back, explaining that I wasn't ready to take risks with it. It was, for now, a security blanket, not an investment tool. He'd drop it, but a flicker of annoyance would cross his face before he could hide it. Then came the conversation that changed everything. It was a Tuesday night. I'd just gotten home from a long day at the firm, my mind still buzzing with blueprints and client revisions. Liam was already home, sitting on the sofa in the dark, which was unusual. He was normally a whirlwind of energy, music playing, getting a snack. The silence felt heavy, ominous. "Hey, is everything okay?" I asked, dropping my keys into the bowl by the door. He didn't look up, just stared at the polished hardwood floor. "We need to talk, Diana." My stomach tightened. Those 4 words are rarely the prelude to anything good. I sat down on the armchair opposite him, keeping a cautious distance. "Okay," I said slowly. "What's on your mind?" He took a deep breath, and when he finally looked at me, his expression was one I'd never seen before. It was a mask of strained sincerity, like an actor poorly cast in the role of a concerned partner. "I was talking to Ethan again," he began. "They got the official quote from the fertility clinic. It's even more than they thought. For the full course of treatment they recommend, with genetic testing and everything, they're looking at almost $100,000. He paused, letting the weight of the number hang in the air. I felt the familiar pang of sympathy. "Liam, that's awful. They must be heartbroken." "They are," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And Olivia, she's not handling it well. She feels like a failure. Ethan is trying to be strong, but I can see him crumbling. He's looking into taking on a second job, maybe driving for a rideshare service at night, but it won't be enough." He painted a vivid picture of their despair, and my heart went out to them completely. "We have to do something," I said, leaning forward. "Like I said before, we can help. We could give them a loan, a significant one. 20, maybe even $30,000 to get started. They could pay us back over time, no interest." Liam shook his head slowly, a pained expression on his face. "A loan isn't going to cut it, Diana, and it's not fair to put them in debt. They need to focus on the treatment, not on how they're going to pay back my fiancé." "Then a gift," I offered. "We can give them a gift. I'm happy to help, you know that." "A gift of $20,000 won't even cover the first phase of medication," he countered, his voice gaining a sharp edge. "This is an all-or-nothing situation. They need the full amount to have a real chance." I frowned, confused. The full 100,000? Liam, that's an enormous amount of money. And you have it, he said, the words hitting me like stones. The manufactured sympathy in his voice was gone, replaced by a cold, hard logic. You have more than enough. You're sitting on a fortune from your mom, money you haven't even touched. It's just teeting in a savings account, doing nothing. I recoiled as if he'd slapped me. It's not doing nothing, Liam. It's my security. It's for our future, for the house we wanted to build, for our kids one day. It's from my mother. The last words were a desperate plea for him to understand its sentimental value. And what about my family? He shot back, his volume rising. What about my brother's future? The chance for me to be an uncle, for our kids to have cousins? Don't you see? This is for our future. A real family future. We're about to be married. My family is your family. Their problems are our problems. His argument was so twisted, so manipulative, that it left me speechless for a moment. He was using our impending marriage as a weapon, framing my inheritance as a communal family pot that he had the right to dispense. That's not fair, I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. You can't just demand I hand over a huge portion of my inheritance. It's not your decision to make. So you're saying no? He asked, his eyes narrowing. You're saying you'd rather keep your money in an account than help my brother have a child. I'm saying I am willing to help, but giving them $100,000 is not something I'm comfortable with, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's irresponsible. What if the treatment doesn't work? It's a huge gamble. And frankly, it's a deeply personal financial decision that you are trying to force on me. A cruel, bitter smile touched his lips. I see. So it's your money, not our money. All that talk about being a team, about facing everything together, that was just talk, wasn't it? He stood up and began to pace, his movements agitated and aggressive. I should have known. You've been different ever since that money came in, more distant, like you think you're better than us now. The accusation was so wildly untrue that it felt like a punch to the gut. That is not true. Liam, stop it. You're twisting this into something it's not. Am I? He sneered, stopping directly in front of me. Here's what it is, Diana. It's a test of your commitment. Not just to me, but to my family. The people who are supposed to be your family, too. He leaned down, his face close to mine. If you can't be a part of my family in a real, meaningful way, if you can't support them when they are at their lowest point, then maybe you have no business being in my family at all. The blood drained from my face. What are you saying? I'm saying the wedding is off, he declared, his voice chillingly calm. I am not going to marry a woman who is so selfish, so cold-hearted that she would hoard her wealth while my brother's dreams die. So you have a choice. You can fund their baby and we can be a family, or you can keep your precious money and we can be over. It's that simple. He stood there, arms crossed, looking down at me with an expression of utter disdain. The man I loved, the man who had held me while I mourned, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a cold-hearted extortionist who was using the deepest pain of his own brother as leverage to get his hands on my money. The ultimatum hung in the silent room, a poison cloud that choked all the love and trust we had ever shared. He wasn't asking. He was demanding. And in that moment, I realized my perfect future wasn't just on shaky ground. It had just been swallowed by a sinkhole. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, rigid, staring at the ceiling while Liam slept soundly beside me, his breathing even and untroubled. It was astonishing. He had just detonated a bomb in the middle of our relationship, given me an ultimatum that questioned my very character, and he was sleeping like a baby. It was as if, for him, the conversation was a simple business transaction. He had presented his terms, and now he was waiting for my response. The emotional carnage he'd left in his wake didn't seem to affect him at all. The next morning, I felt hollowed out. I called Maya, my best friend since college, before I even had my first sip of coffee. I whispered the whole story to her from the bathroom, the shower running to cover the sound of my voice. I expected sympathy, outrage, a tirade against Liam. What I got was something far more valuable: cold, hard clarity. So let me get this straight, Maya said, her voice sharp and focused even over the phone. He wants a six-figure check from your mother's inheritance to supposedly fund his brother's IVF, and if you don't hand it over, he's canceling the wedding. Yes, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. He said I was selfish. He's not just a jerk, Diana, he's a financial predator, she stated flatly. Maya was a forensic accountant, and her brain was wired to see the patterns and red flags that normal, emotionally invested people missed. This isn't about his brother. This is about the money. The IVF story is the perfect emotional cover. It makes you the villain if you say no, it's classic manipulation. But he seemed so sincere about wanting to help Ethan, I argued weakly, the part of me that still loved him desperately searching for an excuse. Sincere people don't give ultimatums that involve threatening to end a relationship, she countered immediately. First things first, do not, under any circumstances, transfer him a single cent. Second, you need to protect yourself. Is your inheritance in a joint account? No, it's in a separate high-yield savings account in my name only, I said, a small wave of relief washing over me. My mother had always drilled the importance of financial independence into my head. Good girl, Maya said with approval. Keep it that way. Don't let him bully you or guilt you into adding his name to it. For now, just observe. Don't agree to his demand, but don't give him a hard no either. Tell him you need time to think. Watch how he acts. Pay attention to everything. Her advice grounded me. I spent the next few days in a state of hyper-awareness. I told Liam I was seriously considering his request, but that it was a huge decision I couldn't make overnight. His demeanor instantly softened. He was back to being the sweet, attentive fiancé, making my favorite dinner, rubbing my shoulders, telling me how much he loved me. I know it's a lot to ask, babe, he said, his voice dripping with false empathy. I just love my brother so much, and I know you have a good heart. I know you'll do the right thing. The performance was sickeningly smooth. He thought he had me, that it was only a matter of time before I capitulated. But Maya's words echoed in my head. Pay attention to everything. Our wedding was 6 months away, and we had a joint savings account specifically for vendor payments. We'd both been contributing to it for over a year. I'd set up automatic transfers from my paycheck, and he claimed he was doing the same. On a whim, driven by a new, cold knot of suspicion in my stomach, I decided to log in and review the activity, something I hadn't done in months. I had trusted Liam to manage the payments for the venue deposit, the photographer, and the caterer, since he was so insistent on handling the negotiations. I scrolled through the transaction history, my heart beginning to beat faster. I saw the deposits from my paycheck, regular as clockwork. His deposits, however, were sporadic at best. There were entire months where he'd put nothing in, but that wasn't the most alarming part. What made the breath catch in my throat was a withdrawal from 2 weeks ago. A single, clean transfer of $10,000. The description simply read, online transfer. It wasn't made out to our venue, our caterer, or any other vendor name I recognized. It was just a lump sum, vanished from the account. My mind raced. When I'd asked him about the catering deposit last month, he'd said it was all taken care of. Dee told me he'd paid it. But the deposit was supposed to be $7,500, not $10,000. And it should have been a check or a direct payment to the catering company, not an anonymous online transfer. I decided to test him. That evening, I approached it casually. Hey, I was just looking over our wedding budget, and I wanted to get the receipt for the catering deposit for my records. Can you forward it to me? I watched him closely. For a split second, a flicker of panic crossed his eyes before he smoothed it over with a confident smile. Oh, yeah, of course. I've got it in my email somewhere. I'll send it over. Great, thanks, I said, keeping my voice light. And what about the venue? I don't think I ever saw that receipt either. Handled it, babe, he said, waving a dismissive hand. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. I'm on top of it all. The condescending pet name, one he used when he was trying to be charmingly in control, now grated on my nerves like sandpaper. The next day, no receipt appeared in my inbox. When I reminded him that evening, he feigned forgetfulness. "Oh man, it totally slipped my mind. I was slammed at work. I'll get it to you tomorrow, promise." But tomorrow came and went, and still nothing. His evasiveness was a blaring alarm bell. The loving, trustworthy man I thought I knew was being replaced by a liar. He was hiding something connected to that $10,000. The cracks in the facade of our perfect life were no longer just cracks, they were gaping chasms, and I was terrified of the darkness I was beginning to see within them. He wasn't just manipulating me for my inheritance, he was actively stealing from our shared future. The question was no longer if he was lying, but how deep the deception went. The missing receipt and the evasive answers were the catalysts. My grief-stricken heart, which had been clinging to the hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding, finally hardened into a diamond-sharp point of resolve. The man I was supposed to marry was a liar and a thief. No. I needed to know the full extent of his deception. I needed proof. I called Maya and told her about the withdrawal and Liam's suspicious behavior. "Bingo," she said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. "This is what we were looking for, a tangible lie. Now we dig. Diana, I'm going to walk you through this. We're going to be methodical. This is an investigation." Her confidence was a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of power return. I was no longer just a victim of his emotional blackmail, I was an architect of my own search for truth. The first step, Maya advised, was to discreetly gather as much financial documentation of his as I could find. We lived together, his mail came to our apartment, and he was notoriously messy with his paperwork. It wasn't difficult. While he was at his weekly guys' night out, I went into our home office. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sickening cocktail of fear and adrenaline coursing through my veins. I felt like a spy in my own home, a trespasser in my own life. But I pushed through the guilt, reminding myself that he had been the first to trespass on our trust. I started with the disorganized pile of papers on his desk. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Tucked between old magazines were several credit card statements and a letter from a personal loan company. I carefully opened them, my hands trembling slightly. The numbers I saw made me feel nauseous. Maya had suspected he was in financial trouble, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. His credit card balances were astronomical, all of them maxed out to their limits. There were charges for extravagant dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, purchases from high-end clothing stores, and a recurring charge for a luxury car payment that was nearly double what he'd told me it was. He was living a life funded by debt, a life completely disconnected from the reality of his salary. The most damning document was the statement for the personal loan. He had taken out a $50,000 loan almost a year ago, right around the time we got engaged. The interest rate was predatory, and the statement showed he had missed his last 2 payments. He was on the verge of defaulting. A bold, red-lettered warning at the bottom of the page screamed, "Final notice, payment overdue." Suddenly, everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. His desperation, his obsession with my inheritance, his carefully constructed story about Ethan and Olivia, it was all a sham. He didn't need $100,000 for IVF. He needed it to save himself from a financial abyss of his own making. The IVF story wasn't just emotional cover, it was his get-out-of-jail-free card. With the evidence of his debt in hand, Maya and I moved to the next step, tracing the $10,000 withdrawal from our joint wedding account. Maya, with her professional expertise, knew exactly what to look for. We logged into the account together, and she guided me through the process of tracking the transfer's destination. It hadn't gone to a wedding vendor. It had been wired directly to the high-interest loan company to cover his overdue payments and late fees. He had stolen from our shared wedding fund to pay off the secret debt he had accrued behind my back. He had sacrificed our future to patch up his dishonest past. The pain of that discovery was sharp and breathtaking, but Maya didn't let me wallow. "We're not done," she said, her voice firm. "The debt is the motive. The theft is the method. Now we need to dismantle the alibi. We need to prove the IVF story is a lie." This felt like the cruelest part. I had genuine affection for Ethan and Olivia. The thought that they might be complicit in this scheme was devastating, but I had to know. Maya suggested a direct, yet discreet approach. I found the website for the prominent fertility clinic in our city, the one Liam had mentioned by name. Their website listed their services and, crucially, had a new patient inquiry, contact number. The next day, my stomach in knots, I made the call. I gave the receptionist my name and explained that my brother-in-law and his wife, Ethan and Olivia, were patients there and had recommended them highly. I said I was calling to get some preliminary information for a friend. "Oh, that's wonderful," the receptionist said warmly. "Let me just look them up in our system so I can thank them for the referral. What was the last name again?" I gave her their last name. There was a pause and the soft clicking of a keyboard. "I'm sorry," she said after a moment, her voice polite but confused. "I don't seem to have anyone by that name in our system, not as current or past patients. Are you sure you have the right clinic?" My blood ran cold. "Yes, I'm sure," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Thank you for your time." I hung up the phone, the receiver slick with sweat in my hand. That was it. The final, undeniable pie. S of the puzzle, they weren't patients there. They had never been patients there. The entire heart-wrenching story of their struggle, the devastating test results, the crushing financial quotes, it was all an elaborate, cruel fiction. A fiction they were all in on. Ethan, the passionate teacher. Olivia, the gentle librarian. They were actors in Liam's disgusting play, using their own supposed infertility as a plot device to defraud the woman their brother was supposed to love and protect. I sat in my office, surrounded by the blueprints of buildings that were strong, honest, and built on solid foundations, and I felt the entire structure of my own life crumble into dust. The man I loved was a con artist. His family, whom I had embraced as my own, were his accomplices. They had all looked me in the eye and lied, preying on my compassion and my grief. My heartbreak was no longer just about a broken promise or a threatened wedding. It was about the profound violation of trust by a whole family of frauds, and as the initial shock subsided, it was replaced by a cold, quiet rage. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The rage that settled in my bones was not a hot, explosive anger, but a cold, dense fury. It was the kind of anger that clarifies your thoughts and sharpens your focus. I was done crying. I was done feeling like a victim. It was time to take back control. Liam and his family had tried to orchestrate a tragedy where I was the collateral damage. I was going to rewrite the ending. I met Maya for dinner that night, laying out all the evidence I had gathered on the table between our plates. Copies of Liam's credit card statements, the overdue notice for his loan, and my notes from the call with the fertility clinic. She looked it all over, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across her face. "Well, damn, Diana," she said, tapping the loan statement. "You didn't just find a smoking gun. You found the gun, the ammunition, and the signed confession. So, what's the play?" "I'm not just going to leave him," I said, my voice low and steady. "That's too easy. He and his family need to be exposed. They built this entire scheme on a foundation of lies, and I'm going to be the one to demolish it. Publicly." Maya's eyes lit up. "I love where this is going." And so, we devised a plan. It was audacious, theatrical, and utterly terrifying, but it was perfect. The centerpiece of our plan was the one thing Liam still thought he had control over, our engagement party. It was scheduled to take place in 2 weeks at a chic downtown restaurant. He had insisted on it, wanting to show off and celebrate the union he was fully prepared to detonate if he didn't get his money. It was meant to be his stage. I was going to make it mine. The first step was to play my part. I went home that night and put on the performance of a lifetime. I found Liam in the living room, nursing a whiskey. I approached him with a manufactured look of weary resignation. "Liam," I began, my voice soft and slightly shaky. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. You were right." He turned to me, his eyes instantly alert, searching my face. "Right about what?" "About family," I said, letting a tear slip down my cheek. "My mom would have wanted me to take care of my family, and your family is my family. I was being selfish, holding on to the money so tightly. I'm sorry." A slow smile of triumph spread across his face. He pulled me into a hug, but it felt different now. It wasn't comforting, it was possessive. He was a conqueror claiming his prize. "I knew you'd understand," he murmured into my hair. "I knew you had it in you to do the right thing, Diana. I'm so proud of you." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from flinching. "I want to do it," I said, pulling back to look him in the eyes. "I'll give you the money for Ethan and Olivia." His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated relief and greed. "That's my girl," he said, beaming. "This is going to change everything for them. You're a lifesaver." "But I have one condition," I added quickly, before he could get too comfortable. His smile tightened slightly. "What is it?" "I don't want to just quietly transfer the money," I explained, trying to sound earnest and a little naive. "This is such a huge, wonderful thing. I want to make it special. I want to announce it as a gift to them at our engagement party. We can make a big gesture of it, a toast to family and new beginnings. I want everyone, your parents, all our friends, to see how we're coming together as a family to support each other." I watched him process this. His ego, which I now knew was as massive as his debt, took the bait completely. He saw the scene in his head, the adoring fiancé, the public declaration of his family's importance, the validation of his power over me. It wasn't just about getting the money anymore, it was about the victory. "Diana," he said, his voice hick with emotion I knew was fake. "That is the most beautiful, generous idea I have ever heard. It's perfect." For the next 2 weeks, I was the model fiancé. I was sweet, compliant, and enthusiastic about the party. Liam was on cloud 9, believing he had masterfully bent me to his will. He was more affectionate than he'd been in months, oblivious to the icy resolve behind my smiles. While he was busy basking in his premature victory, Maya and I were preparing for war. First, I went to my bank. I opened a new series of accounts at a completely different institution. I transferred every penny of my inheritance, along with my personal savings, into these new, secure accounts under my name only. The joint wedding account was the next target. I calculated exactly how much I had personally contributed to it over the past year, and, citing unauthorized activity, which was technically true, I had the bank transfer my contributed portion back to my new private account, effectively draining it of anything I had put in. The remaining funds, Liam's paltry and inconsistent contributions, were all that was left. Next, Maya helped me prepare my presentation. We created a simple but devastating PowerPoint slideshow. It contained scanned copies of his credit card statements with the balances circled in red, the final notice from the loan company, and a screenshot of the $10,000 transfer from our wedding fund to his debtors. We created a slide that read, "Cost of IVF treatment at City Fertility Clinic, $100,000, alleged." The next slide in bold letters said, "Record of Ethan and Olivia as patients, none." Finally, I packed. Quietly, methodically, while Liam was at work, I boxed up my most important belongings: my mother's photos, my personal documents, my favorite books, clothes. I rented a small storage unit and moved everything out piece by piece so he wouldn't notice. I was systematically erasing myself from the life we had built, and he was too blinded by greed to even see it. The night of the engagement party arrived. I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom, zipping up a stunning, deep red dress. It was a power color, a color of warning. Liam came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You look incredible," he said, kissing my shoulder. "Tonight's going to be perfect, the start of the rest of our lives." "Yes, it is," I said, meeting his eyes in the reflection. My smile felt sharp, like broken glass. "It's going to be a night no one will ever forget." The restaurant was buzzing with energy. Soft lighting glinted off champagne flutes, and the low hum of cheerful conversation filled the private room Liam had booked. It was exactly the scene he had envisioned, a room full of friends, family, and a few of his work colleagues, all there to celebrate us. His parents greeted me with warm hugs, telling me how thrilled they were. "Liam told us about your incredibly generous plan for Ethan and Olivia," his mother whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "You have such a beautiful heart, Diana. We are so lucky to have you joining our family." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Ethan and Olivia were there, playing their parts to perfection. They looked at me with expressions of profound, humble gratitude. Olivia hugged me tightly, her voice trembling as she said, "Diana, we don't even know what to say. You're giving us the greatest gift imaginable." I simply smiled and squeezed her hand, a silent promise of the true gift I had in store for them. I moved through the room, accepting congratulations, my composure a carefully constructed fortress. Maya was there, giving me a subtle, encouraging nod from across the room. She was my anchor in this sea of deception. After about an hour of mingling, Liam tapped a fork against his glass, calling for everyone's attention. The room fell silent. He stood in the center of the room, a proud, beaming smile on his face, his arm possessively around my waist. "I just want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate with us," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "Marrying Diana is the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's not only brilliant and beautiful, but she has the most generous heart of anyone I've ever known." He looked down at me, his eyes full of what anyone else would have seen as love. I saw it for what it was, the look of a satisfied predator. "Family has always been the most important thing to me," he continued, his gaze sweeping over to his parents and brother. "And Diana understands that. She has embraced my family as her own. In fact, she is about to show us all the true meaning of family support with a gesture so incredible, it leaves me speechless." He turned the spotlight to me. "My darling, would you like to say a few words?" This was it, showtime. I gracefully detached myself from his side and walked to the front of the room, where a small lectern and microphone were set up. A large screen was Ted on the wall behind it, currently displaying a generic "Congratulations, Diana and Liam" slide. I had told the event manager I had a small photo slideshow to share. I took a deep breath and smiled at our guests. "Thank you so much, Liam, and thank you all for being here with us tonight. It means the world to us." My voice was clear and steady. "Liam is right. Family is everything. My mother taught me that. She taught me the importance of honesty, integrity, and building a life on a foundation of trust. The legacy she left me wasn't just financial, it was a legacy of character. And it's in the spirit of that legacy that I want to present my gift tonight." I clicked the remote in my hand. The congratulations slide disappeared, replaced by a high-resolution scan of Liam's most recent credit card statement. The staggering balance of over $20,000 was circled in bright red. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Liam's smile froze on his face. "My gift tonight," I announced, my voice ringing with newfound strength, "is a gift of truth." I clicked again. The next slide showed his second credit card statement, then the third, each one displaying a maxed-out balance. "For the past year, my fiancé, a man who works as a financial advisor, has been hiding over $50,000 of personal credit card debt from me." Liam's face had gone from shock to ashen. His parents were staring at the screen, their mouths agape. Click, the next slide was the overdue notice for his personal loan. The words "final notice" were impossible to miss. "In addition to the credit cards," I continued, my gaze fixed on Liam, "he is also on the verge of defaulting on a $50,000 secret loan he took out right after we got engaged." I heard a strangled noise from Liam's mother. Liam took a step toward me, his hand outstretched, his face a mask of horror. "Diana, what are you doing?" he hissed. "I'm just getting to the best part," I said sweetly, then clicked the remote again. A screenshot of our joint wedding account's transaction history filled the screen, the $10,000 transfer to the loan company highlighted in yellow. To cover his secret debt, Liam felt it was appropriate to steal $10,000 from our shared wedding fund, money I had saved to build our future. He stole from us to cover his lies. The room was dead silent now, the only sound my own amplified voice. I turned my attention to Ethan and Olivia, who looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. Of course, a man in this much debt needs a solution, a big one, and luckily for him, I received a substantial inheritance from my late mother. All he needed was a story. A sad story. a story about his wonderful brother and sister-in-law who were desperate for a child and needed $100,000 for IVF. Click, the slide with the clinic's name and the alleged cost appeared. I let it hang there for a moment before the final, devastating click. The words, "Record of Ethan and Olivia as patients," none appeared in enormous, bold, black letters. Because the story was a lie, I declared, my voice resonating with all the pain and betrayal I had felt. A disgusting, manipulative scheme cooked up by the three of them to con me out of my mother's money. They preyed on my compassion, used the deeply personal pain of infertility as a prop in their little play, all so Liam could pay off his debts. I looked directly at Liam, whose face was now a blotchy red of pure fury and humiliation. I slowly slipped the engagement ring off my finger. It felt surprisingly light. I walked over to the lectern and placed it deliberately on top. "So no, Liam, I will not be giving you $100,000, I said, my voice dropping to a powerful, clear tone. My inheritance is not for sale, and neither am I. The wedding is obviously off. I turned to the stunned crowd. But please enjoy the party. After all, I added, looking back at Liam one last time, he's already paid for it with money he doesn't have. And with that, I turned, picked up my purse, and walked out of the room, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life and the stunned silence of everyone who had just witnessed the truth. Walking out of that restaurant was like stepping out of a pressure cooker. The cool night air hit my face, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could truly breathe. I didn't look back. Maya caught up with me on the sidewalk, a triumphant, furious grin on her face. She threw her arms around me. "That was the most legendary thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life," she said, her voice buzzing with energy. "Are you okay?" "I think I am," I said, a real smile, my first in a long time, touching my lips. "I think I'm going to be more than okay." The immediate aftermath was chaotic, just as I had expected. My phone exploded with texts and missed calls from Liam, his parents, and a host of mutual friends who had been at the party. I ignored all of them. Maya and I went back to her apartment where I had already stashed an overnight bag. We ordered pizza, opened a bottle of expensive champagne I'd been saving, and I finally let the tears come, not tears of heartbreak, but of relief. The weight of the deception I had been carrying was finally gone. The next morning, the reality of my new life began. The first order of business was security. I had a locksmith meet me at my apartment, the one I had once called our sanctuary, and had all the locks changed. When I stepped inside, the space felt eerily empty without my personal touches, but also clean and clear. It was a blank slate. Later that day, Liam showed up, pounding on the door, his apologies and accusations muffled by the solid wood. I didn't answer. I had Maya's lawyer draft a cease and desist letter, which was sent to him the following day. The social fallout was swift. Liam's attempt to paint me as a hysterical, vindictive psycho failed spectacularly. Too many people had seen the evidence with their own eyes. The story of his debt, theft, and the elaborate IVF scam spread like wildfire through our social circle. His humiliation was absolute. A colleague of his who had been at the party apparently reported his massive, undisclosed debt to their company's compliance department. As a financial advisor, his position was untenable. He was suspended pending an investigation, and, I later heard, was ultimately fired. His family imploded. His parents were mortified, caught between the shame of their son's actions and the public fallout. They sent me a long, rambling letter full of apologies, but it was too little, too late. The damage to their family's reputation was done. Ethan and Olivia became social pariahs. The lie they had participated in, trivializing the real pain of infertility for financial gain, was particularly vile, and people did not forget it. I heard through the grapevine that Olivia had to leave her job at the library due to the gossip, and Ethan's position as a role model for high school students was seriously compromised. Their desperate grab for money had cost them everything. As for me, I focused on building. It was what I did best, after all. With Liam and his toxic family excised from my life, I felt a surge of creative and personal energy. I used a significant portion of my inheritance, my mother's gift, exactly as I had always wanted to. I bought a beautiful piece of property in a quiet, leafy suburb, and I poured my heart and soul into designing my own home. It wasn't the grand mansion Liam would have wanted, but a smart, elegant, and peaceful space, filled with light and designed for a life of quiet confidence. The process of creating my own home was incredibly healing. Every design choice, every material I selected, was an act of reclaiming my independence. I wasn't building a future with someone else anymore. I was building a future for myself, on a foundation of my own making. I also invested in my career, using some of the funds to take advanced courses and eventually start my own boutique architectural design firm. My work flourished, fueled by a newfound passion and clarity. It took time to heal emotionally. The betrayal left scars, and learning to trust again was a slow process. But I was surrounded by true friends like Maya and supported by my family, who were proud of the strength I had shown. I learned that my mother's legacy wasn't just the money she left me. It was the resilience she had instilled in me, the integrity she had taught me, and the courage to stand up for myself. About a year after the infamous engagement party, I was standing on the unfinished deck of my new house, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an old friend, containing a screenshot of Liam's social media profile. He had moved to a different state and was working at a used car dealership. The picture showed a man who looked tired, defeated, and much older than his years. I felt a brief, fleeting flicker of something, not pity, but a sense of cosmic balance. He had gotten what he deserved. I deleted the message, took a deep breath of the clean evening air, and looked out at the frame of the life I was building. It was strong, it was honest, and it was all mine. The past was a blueprint of lessons learned, but the future was an open space, waiting to be designed. And for the first time, I felt truly, completely free.